Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel, and yes, it's the Casey Anthony trial and the next defence witness is Richard Eikelenboom. He is a DNA scientist from the Netherlands and he has been a DNA scientist for over 20 years. So first he is asked to explain about touch DNA, which he says is primarily left by the hands. He further explains that if a surface is touched very lightly, the chances of retrieving DNA is slim. So Richard actually has a touch DNA PowerPoint presentation about this. So he says if the surface is touched with more force, the chances of getting DNA sample is increased, which makes sense. And it's common sense, really. So Richard then talks about the 3 types of contact. The first being wearing, which means clothing and jewellery like a watch, because items of clothing etc. can be worn for a longer period of time, making the chances of retrieving DNA very high. The second is forceful contact, like grabbing someone by the arm or strangulation. And the third is moderate touch, like touching a doorbell, which is, where there is a very minimal chance of retrieving DNA. As for the duct tape, a lot more force would need to be used to cut it. And if it was on the face and mouth, there is also a lot of skin cells there too. So his opinion is that if the tape was on Kaylee's face, you would expect quite a lot of DNA there, which I totally agree with. But if there were bad conditions, the DNA could break down. But with the techniques they have today, you would still expect to be able to get DNA. So, you're torn with this because, if the tape had been on Kaylee's face, you would totally expect there to be some DNA there, but then you've got the conditions of where she was, so you don't know if there was some DNA there and it was just totally wiped away. Now we move on to extracting DNA from maggots and flies, because as we know, they feed on human material, so there is cell material in their system which contains DNA, therefore making it possible to extract DNA from maggots. Should this have been done if there was maggot activity? Well, they knew it was Kaylee, so I don't know. From the maggots in the car, yes. So the cross-examination, Richard doesn't presently have a PhD. He's currently a student of biology trying to obtain his PhD. Okay, so I didn't mention this earlier, that he and his wife and a co-worker started their own DNA lab facility in Holland, and then they expanded to the US as he says there are more homicides there. So Mr. Ashton is pointing out that the exposure they would have got from this case would really benefit them, which, yes, makes sense, but Richard doesn't agree, although their lab in the US isn't even open yet. But he does say they do already have a lot of work. He says that his lab isn't like all the others that are in the US because his lab does a lot more testing than they do. Says moisture and temperature has a very detrimental effect on DNA and also bacteria. So, right, redirect. Richard's lab is known internationally as the crime farm, and he has been sought out by other countries to have DNA tested at his lab. His lab had already had a lot of exposure and recognition prior to coming to the US through a number of cases, and one of those was Tim Masters, where Richard was asked to do the DNA in this case. Due to his testing, the defendant was exonerated. There was also another case where he was able to retrieve touch DNA from clothing in a case that happened 20 years ago, and that also got him a lot of recognition. So it kind of voids the fact that taking on this case would have got him a lot more recognition, because I think he was doing fine without it. And through these cases, he got a lot more cases, and law enforcement from all over the world would travel to the Netherlands to consult with him. So there we go. So that's it for this testimony. Not a crazy one like the past two. So I'll be back with more in more videos. Till then, bye for now.